There's been a lot going on in boxing at the minute, a lot. And to be honest, there's so many different things that, quite frankly, I cannot be bothered to sit down and make separate videos on all of them. So I'm going to try and rattle through a few different bits in this video. First and foremost, Enzo Macronelli versus Roy Jones Jr. I mean, that's a fight that's been talked about now for a little while. But, you know, I saw photos of them on Boxing Scene together in Russia, you know, posing and stuff. So it looks like this fight is actually going to happen. You know, big bill, and it's going to be out there in Russia. Roy Jones Jr. is now a citizen of Russia and looking to campaign out there, which is bizarre in the extreme. But, yeah, I mean, good luck on Enzo. I've seen Enzo fight live a few times. I know he's had his highs and his lows, but he's a guy who keeps in incredible shape, and he stays very, very fit. And who knows? I mean, thinking about it, I wouldn't discount him out of the fight. You know, Roy Jones Jr., he must be, I know both of them are in the autumn of their careers now, but Roy Jones Jr. must be quite a few years older than Enzo, and obviously Roy Jones himself has taken some heavy losses. I think this is for the WBA super version of the cruiserweight titles. I don't know what the WBA are doing. I might have got that sanctioning body wrong, so apologies if I have. Someone will need to check it and comment. But yeah, how you get either one of these two in a super championship, I don't know. Like, Enzo Macronelli was campaigning at light heavyweight last time I heard about it. So a bit bizarre in that sense. You know, Enzo fought for Jürgen Bremer's title a while ago, and even though he was, you know, outclassed in that fight and beaten up essentially, he performed with some credit. You know, he's someone who could make cruiserweight fairly easily. Obviously, we know back in the day he used to fight at cruiserweight when he was fighting David Haye. And Roy Jones Jr., you know, he's so old and he's so faded from what he was. You'd have to say it's not completely inconceivable that Enzo Macronelli could win this fight. The one thing I would say is Roy Jones still seems to maintain some power, you know. He still seems to whack pretty hard. You see him icing opponents. And they are lower level opponents. Lower level than the Enzo Macronellis of this world. But he still seems very, very heavy-handed in his old age. And, you know, Macronelli, that chin, how's it going to hold up? Who knows? What I would say is Macronelli's probably a step up in class from the guys that Roy Jones has been fighting in the last year or so. So we shall see. Interesting fight. And I'll tell you what, with Frank Warren, like some of these fights that are going to be on Box Nation, you know, Macronelli, Roy Jones Jr., talking about Liam Smith, Shane Mosley. What's next? Bradley Skeet calling Floyd Mayweather out of retirement. You know, there's some pretty all-star names fighting, you know, fighting what I guess should be classed as lower-level champions in Macronelli and Liam Smith. Honestly, it's a decent sewing from Box Nation, this. So that's one thing that I thought I'd want to throw out there. Who are you picking in that fight? How do you see it going? For me, I think that the Roy Jones power will still be enough to get the job done. I think Macronelli's chin is dodgy at best. And I think Roy Jones has obviously picked Macronelli out to lose, hasn't he? So you'd make Roy Jones a favourite. But I wouldn't rule Macronelli out, even at cruiserweight, even at this late stage of his career. So let me know your thoughts on that. Let's change the paces massively. Let's talk Curtis Stevens. He today called out Chris Eubank Jr. on social media. Sorry, a bit dehydrated after the day's work. He posted a photo on social media of a tombstone saying Chris Eubank Jr. on it, saying it was time to fight some real opposition. So I guess that shows that your man Eubank Jr. is starting to get recognised and starting to get talked about in the wider boxing area. Because, you know, Curtis Stevens is, you know, probably not a name you usually associate with fighting UK prospects. Obviously, he fancies some of that UK money, but it's a fight that could happen realistically. You know, assuming Eubank beats Spike O'Sullivan, which is a big if, I guess they're going to want to take those kind of step-up fights because, you know, the best names on his resume will still be Spike O'Sullivan, Chudinov, and there's a bit of a gap there between those sort of operators and the top level. So a guy like Curtis Stevens could help to bridge that gap between, you know, the Quillens, Jacobs of this world that he's supposedly fighting in a final eliminator for. So that's interesting. I guess the main news is that Eubank Jr. is getting recognised internationally. I don't rate Curtis Stevens, actually. I've always thought he was overrated as a fighter. I remember him getting absolutely schooled by Hassan and Damon Jicken, so I've never been too hot on him overly. But, you know, interesting that there's a bit of internet beef building up there. Eubank Jr. has certainly got his fans, hasn't he? Let's swap briefly to the... there's a few bits of the heavyweight division I want to talk about briefly as well. I'm kind of classing this video more as like a daily roundup. There's been so much news today. I want to talk Andre Ward. It looks like he is fighting on the Cotto Canelo undercard. And the names he's fighting, I've heard Cedric Agnew, and there's another name doing the rounds as well, which I can't quite remember off the top of my head. I mean, what is Andre Ward doing? You know, he should be in the big fights. He should be calling out names. He shouldn't be fighting on undercards. He shouldn't be getting his fights rejected by broadcasters. I mean, this is terrible for Andre Ward. What I want to know is, why on earth is he fighting this level of opposition? I know he's been out of the ring and he's had problems, etc. But, you know, Floyd Mayweather came back after a long time and went straight into competitive fights. I mean, you can't do that if you're an elite level fighter. And that's what Andre Ward is, the super elite. I mean, these kind of fights, he's not going to learn anything from them. He's not going to make money doing them. They're not going to generate interest with the fans. And all it's going to do is make him look semi-ridiculous, you know. How can we take him versus Kovalev or him versus Golovkin seriously? You know, when the only opponent he's fought for several years is Paul Smith and Cedric Agnew. I mean, I'm a big Andre Ward fan. I think he's right at the top of the pound for pound list. And I think on his day he's got the potential to go down as an all-time great. But this level of opposition is embarrassing. And he needs to step it up, you know. The one that Frank Warren's on, I'm surprised we're not seeing Frank Buglioni versus Andre Ward at the minute, I'll tell you that. Heavyweight division, let's talk some fights that actually have been made. Amir Mansour versus Arthur Szpilka for December. Nice fight, 50-50 matchup that in my mind. Slight lean to Szpilka. You know, Mansour's a decent fighter. He's campaigning at a decent level now, you know, fights with Jared Washington, which went down as a draw. The famous Steve Cunningham matchup, etc. They're both guys, Amir Mansour and Szpilka, who I have sort of rated between 25 and 30th in the division. I think Szpilka's somewhat overrated. You know, in hindsight, Bryant Jennings dealt with him with you know, quite some ease. Bryant Jennings found him a much easier fight than he did Mike Perez, for example. I know styles make fights, but Szpilka, he's not one of these guys who does anything amazing. Yeah, what I do see about Szpilka is he's got momentum behind him. He signed with Al Heyman, and I talk about momentum a lot, but it's so important in these kind of tough matches. But he signed with Al Heyman. I think he's a big ticket seller, especially in various parts of the States like New York. I think there's a huge Polish community who are very into their boxing, and they get behind guys like Szpilka, guys like Fanfara, for example. So, you know, Szpilka's been fed a few bums since he fought Bryant Jennings. He's on the comeback trail. He's put a few wins back to back, and he's moving in the right direction. Amir Mansour, you know, he's getting older by the day, isn't he? He's another guy. He must be early to mid-40s now. Although he's looked good and performed really credibly when he stepped up to this sort of level with the Jared Washingtons and the Steve Cunninghams, fundamentally, I think he's slightly struggling. And I just think that the younger Szpilka, with all that momentum, and apparently he's taking his fitness a lot more seriously now, is probably going to have the edge in this fight. But the winner of this goes on, you know, to have a decent fight, I like to think. Mansour's profile is building with these kind of fights. Szpilka's obviously with Al Heyman, and it's no surprise if the winner of this gets some sort of voluntary defence against Deontay Wilder, something of that nature. Speaking of Deontay Wilder, final bit of news I'll leave you with. I see Deontay Wilder's been announced as an analyst for the Tony Thompson Malik Scott card on PBC. Now that is interesting news, because you wonder if that's an effort to build for a fight between those two guys and Deontay Wilder in a sort of voluntary challenger type place. You know, I know Deontay Wilder's team and manager are sort of lobbying the WBC to allow him to have a voluntary ahead of the Povetkin fight, because Povetkin's fighting Mariusz Wok. WBC have said no initially, but who knows, they're liable to change their mind at any moment. They seem to be very flexible on their heavyweight champions. So who knows? Slightly worrying that he's commenting. You know, Tony Thompson, Malik Scott, they're interesting fighters, they're likeable characters. Possibly not the kind of guys you want to be seeing fighting for world titles, but who knows? That's an interesting fight anyway. So I'll leave it with you. Thanks for watching. Wanted to discuss a few separate stories, give a bit of coverage to a few different fights on the channel. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you like these kind of videos. Who you picking? If Eubank fought Stevens, if Enzo fights Roy Jones, if Mansour fights Szpilka, and who you picking in Tony Thompson Scott. Thanks for watching.